All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Again, thank you everyone for showing up today and joining in this. We're going to go over PTZ cameras or pan-tilt zoom cameras today. We're going to be talking about the features and solutions, and let's go ahead and get started. So, what is the agenda? Well, first off, if you're not familiar, we're going to talk about what is a PTZ, so kind of what they are, what type of cameras they are, and then we'll talk about the specific types of PTZ. So, there are a big range of PTZs, and not all PTZs are the same. So we're going to talk about like what you want to look for when you're looking at a PTZ. And then we're going to go over some of the features like presets, patrols, and some of the automation stuff that you can do with PTZs. And then we'll talk a little bit more specifically about the models that we offer and then jump into some Q&A. If you do have questions, feel free to put them in whenever as we're going. You don't have to wait till the end or anything like that, so feel free to put them in then, and we'll either address them as we can or we will answer them at the end potentially as well. So, um, and as we get going, if you're not familiar with who we are at SCW, we're a value-driven company that provides end-to-end security solutions. We do this with free consultations. You can get either installation, turnkey installation, or you can choose to self-install it. And one of our big key to fame is our world-class support team, all based here in Asheville, North Carolina. So whatever option you go with, you'll never be left without great support. So yeah, let's jump right into it. So PTZs, pan-tilt zoom. So what even is a PTZ if you're not familiar with it? Well, PTZs are basically cameras that can be moved on the fly, and they can be moved left and right, which I'll show in just a second. That's going to be our pan. They can be tilted up and down, which is going to be our tilt, and then they can be zoomed in and out, which is of course our zoom, bringing us into the cleverly named pan-tilt zoom camera. And so panning, what does that look like? So that's left to right movement. Like you can see here in this GIF, being able to spin the PTZ around, pretty self-explanatory. One thing we will talk about, as we go into the specifics of PTZs is, a lot of PTZs can do a full revolution around it, which is, important for some areas, and some of them actually stop. And then you have to go kind of all the way back. So you're trying to do quick motions and stuff like that. You want to make sure that that PTZ can do a 360 pan. Tilting. This one is a little, obviously we kind of understand if you want to tilt, you can see in this GIF as well that we can kind of tilt upwards, and then we can also tilt straight down to be able to see directly below the camera. A lot of people understand the straight down because they want to see what's below the camera, but the tilting up spec and why you need that tilt up doesn't always click for people. But it is actually a pretty important thing when you're at elevation. So, if the camera is sort of below where you're kind of pointing, you need to tilt it up. So if the elevation kind of rises in the area you're pointing at, being able to tilt up is the difference between actually seeing the object or zooming in on the grass. So, definitely another key thing you want to look out for when you're looking at PTZs. But that's going to be the T. And of course, the zoom, the most obvious one. This is the zoom. And we can see kind of what that looks like here on this GIF too. And of course, the zoom in, zoom out. And PTZs come in so many different ranges. Of course, we've got ones that are just short range for smaller areas, and we've got one that are long range that, can zoom in and see things hundreds and hundreds of feet away. So that's really the basics of what that PTZ even stands for and what they do. What about the controlling aspect? How do you do all this stuff? Well, there's a lot of options to control a PTZ, and you can see here on this GIF, we're controlling it just right from the software by clicking the direction arrows. So you can do it from the software. In our case, that includes, the web interface, our desktop software, as well as our mobile app as well. You can control the PTZs from all of those. You can also get hardware joysticks. So for people who are, this is a big part of your job to control the PTZ, your guards, your operators, everything like that, your security personnel, they may want like a specific hardware joystick, which is another option to control it as well. It gives you a little bit more precise movement, more dedicated sometimes as well. So that's how you actually control the PTZ. So it's really easy to control them, really accessible to control them from anywhere you go. And let's talk about the PTZ types now. So They come in a lot of different variations. So, and each of them are designed to solve specific security challenges. So, and some of these questions that you may want to know when you're looking at PTZs is the range. Well, how far can it zoom? Like I mentioned, we have ones that are, only for about 150 feet of zoom capability. And then we have ones that, are close to 1,000 feet of zoom capability. So to be able to identify a person, I should say. And so that's going to depend, on what you need there, how far your facility is, and from key aspects and areas. So if you got materials maybe 500 feet away, you definitely want to get one that can zoom and see that. Speed. This is sort of a underrated thing on PTZs, but every PTZ has a motor built into it, and they all run at sort of different speeds. So when you're moving that PTZ around, if you're moving it a lot, you want that PTZ to be fast and responsive. Some of the other PTZs may be a little bit slower. They may not be able to go from one point to another very quickly, maybe a little bit difficult to control. So that's going to be a big thing is speed of the PTZ. And then the size. PTZs come in a lot of different sizes. You can see in this image to the right of here of two of our different models. We have one that's we call the Lookout. That's the big one there on the left, and the other one we call the Bastion. That's on the right. And you can see that they're very different sizes. And if size is a important part of the decision making you're doing, maybe it's inside, maybe you're in a retail application, you don't want this big camera to kind of stick out a little bit. You want to kind of factor in the size or the form factor. And then of course cost. When you get more range, when you get better speed, when you get sometimes smaller size, the cost can go up. So that's something you want to consider. How much of the budget are you going to put for this PTZ camera? So let's talk about the range more specifically. It's going to be determined by two main specs. The lens range, which you're going to see in terms of maybe like a 40x, for example. One of ours is a ultra long range 40x PTZ, and you can see also the lens range here. So that's like the 5.7 to 228 millimeters we see there. So that's going to be one of the determinations, and of course also the camera's resolution. So the higher the resolution combined with the lens, the more it can see. So this is also a 4K camera. So it's our longest range PTZ by far. So you need to make that consideration specifically on how far do you need to see and what details do you need to see. Seeing a face, seeing other things, you just need to be able to see if somebody's there, not necessarily who it is. So that's going to determine what kind of range you really want to get. And like I mentioned with speed, this is sort of an underrated one, but at least on all our cameras, we do have the spec there listed in terms of how fast it is and everything like that. Like I mentioned, this is a critical thing that is going to determine, especially if you're going to be somebody who can be using this PTZ pretty frequently, that you want to make sure is matching what you need. And if you're trying to look at a very large area, so if you have a square footage wise, a large area they're going to be using that PTZ on, that even becomes more important because you're going to have to go, you're going to have to go left and right, up and down all the time. So I'd recommend if you're shopping around to ask people for demos or videos of it. Hey, show me it moving around if they don't have that already. So that way you can determine, okay, yeah, that seems like it's going pretty fast there, because sometimes reading the specs and being like, this is 0.1 degrees a second to 200 degrees, that doesn't mean anything even barely to me, to be honest with you. So seeing it and actually, is believing in a lot of cases. And then size, like I mentioned, a lot of different form factors. Again, usually the larger PTZs, they generally have a lot more room for a motor. So for example, this one on the left here is is our fastest PTZ. Not that this is slow, but again, this is just a little faster. So, and usually, but not always, the larger the camera, generally the more range you're probably going to get as well. And size comes in two different thought processes, I guess, and it's going to depend on your industry and what your goals are. Size can be a deterrent in itself. So somebody sees that big camera there, that can be a passive deterrence. Whereas, again, like I mentioned, if you're in a retail or maybe car dealerships or something like that, having a big, kind of almost intimidating looking camera sometimes is not always the best thing for that application. So you may want something a little smaller that blends in more. So that rolls into the next portion, which is going to be our presets, patrols, and automations. So what are these things? Well, first off, a preset. So these are like a bookmark for your PTZ. So we know bookmarks from web browsers. We like sites. We bookmark them so we can get there very easily without having to type it every single time and all that. It's very similar for PTZ. So essentially what you do is you go to an area, you create that bookmark, and then you can jump to that area. Of course, I'll show it to you in just a little bit when we get to the live demo aspect. But you can see here on the right, I've got a series of ones here from, the recycling to the bridge to all these different areas. And you can imagine creating them for your facility as well. So your entrances, your exits, key areas where you've got materials, where there's deliveries coming in, everything like that. And it just allows you to very easily control the PTZ from anywhere, again, because you can do it on the mobile app, call that, and you don't have to kind of mess around and figure out where it is. It's just simple click, click, and you're there. Super easy to create as well, because all you have to do is move it, hit a button, and name it, and that's the extent of it. So presets are one of those things. When I'm onboarding somebody that has a PTZ and they want to learn, they want to learn how to get the best out of the PTZ, being able to utilize your presets is going to make controlling it so much easier. And here's an example of it as well. So you can see on the right here, I'm just sort of selecting it, and it just goes between the various presets. And it also does it very quickly too. So that's the other advantage, sometimes when PTZs are in the presets, they actually can go a little bit faster than when you're manually controlling it. So in terms of speed, it's very quick to go from point to point generally. Let's show this one more time so you kind of get that snap effect there. So the next form of automation is something called patrols. So, one of the things that PTZ can do is basically be set to either do a what's known as a preset patrol, which means that you're going from one of those presets you create to the next one, to the next one, and so on. So maybe you want to go from, say, your entrance to your exit to the shipping area, and it just will go from those points automatically for you, and then that way you can see those, without having to do anything. You also can kind of record one, which basically means you just sort of hit the record button, you move the PTZ and it knows how you moved it. You hit the record button again, and then you can play it, and I'll show that as well. But there's a lot of applications for this. So like sweeping through parking lots, jumping through your key locations, stuff like that. And you can see what that looks like over here as well. Like this one goes from the recycling, then it goes to the parking. It sits there for 30 seconds at the parking area. Then it goes to our van area, sits there for 45 seconds, and then it'll go back to the recycling and so on. And here's what that looks like. So this is on a patrol here, and this one's more of a sweep. So we're kind of looking at the trucks over here. Oops, so sorry, change that. This one I had it to where it stops here at the doors there for a second. Again, stops here at the door. And then it will go on to the other part of the parking lot here. And then stays here for just a couple seconds, and then it will actually go back, like we can see here, and then it's just going to loop around for that. So that's this was a recorded patrol, but of course you can do something similar with a preset patrol as well. So a note about patrols is patrols have a lot of utility, and when you think about, how can I get the most amount of detail, most amount of coverage with this PTZ, patrols are a really good way of doing it. But one thing to keep in mind, patrols can only be, when the PTZ is looking at a certain area, it's only looking at that area. So for example, when we just saw that video there, when it's looking at that door, I can't go back to that parking lot on playback or something like that. So it's gonna what it sees is what it records. So one of the things we definitely recommend is to make sure that you have what's known as sort of a cover camera. And that's a camera that's looking at the wider area. And the reason for that is that patrols are really good at getting at details. So, if I needed to see that entire truck area with a lot of details, I need a lot of cameras. So, this allows me to use that PTZ to get details, and then I may have another camera wider that looks at most of the entire scene. So, even though I may not see the entire scene on the PTZ, I still get the details that I need from the PTZ, the wider scene from the wider cover camera, so to speak. And then there's also an Autoguard function that I wanted to get into. So this is basically what's known as an idle function. So you stop controlling the PTZ. What do you want it to have doing after somebody doesn't control it for, say, 60 seconds? So you can see here on the right that you can do things like call a preset. So you can go back to a certain position after somebody's controlling it. That sort of prevents Steve from pointing the PTZ at a wall and forgetting to move it back kind of situation. But you can also even do a patrol with that as well. So if you wanted to go and say, okay, after I'm done controlling it, go ahead and go back to that sweep so I can go ahead and see, my truck area again. So this is one of those other things that is like hugely important. There's nothing worse than, having a PTZ that you expect to be in a certain area or to look down a certain area and you realize that you forgot to put it back after you're done. This will just do that for you. So this is one of those ones I highly recommend when you're going through this, setting up that PTZ for the first time, that you do set up this function as soon as you can, because it's going to prevent thinking you have footage and then realizing it was pointed at a wall or something like that. So and another thing I'll mention is that our support team, of course, is happy to walk you through getting this set up. It's very simple. You just basically select your option here and everything like that. But if you do need help, support's there for you. And this is an example of Autoguard, and it's basically just calling a preset. So, you can see it's here looking at the wall. After it's done, it jumps back to the ramp where we're able to see that. So let's jump into the actual live aspect of this PTZ. So I'm going to hide this for just a second and open up our UStation application here. And I'm going to bring up the Bastion here. This is one of our newer PTZs. We'll go into more detail on that, but I kind of want to show, what this looks like in a live application, as well as sort of explaining it that way. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and zoom out. And just sort of move it around so you kind of get a scale of how far we moved in. That's about 300 or 400 feet away. But yeah, you can see what panning looks like here. I can go also kind of like different directions. You can see I got corner directions as well as left, right, up, and down. So you can see what that looks like. I'm remote from this place too, so you can see it's pretty responsive as well. And then of course we've got our zoom here. If I want to zoom in, see what's going on over here, I can do that. See who's in the van here. And then zoom back out here. So hopefully that gives you an idea of like the control here. And I want to show a couple of other things. One of my favorite features of our PTZs and our software here too is the ability to do this 3D zoom here. So basically what I can do is I can draw a box here and it will actually physically move the PTZ over there. So again, if I want to kind of zoom in a little bit more on these vehicles, we can see that. I can see, close that out here. And then I can further, so that's just another way of controlling the PTZ. I find it really useful for zooming in on like a large area like this. This is a pretty wide area we have here. So again, if I want to kind of maybe zoom in on this bridge over here, I can just let it do its thing, and then it zooms in there where I need it to zoom. So to me, really cool feature as well to help control the PTZs. And then the other things we talked about, so the presets. So we've got some series of presets here. You can see that I've labeled them, everything like that. So I've got one here named recycling. I can go ahead and click that and then hit call. So you get that gets to the recycling area. We also have one for the trailer, where there's a little truck there right now. I got one for the door, and I've even got one for this series of hotels across from us that are about a mile away. So you can see how quick I'm able to move the PTZ around using these presets. So you can again imagine all the key points that you want to keep an eye on and be able to do that very easily. And you see the auto guard function just put in because I have it set to like 15 seconds. So that one just snapped right back to where it's supposed to go, which is on the ramp here. And then the last thing I want to show just here live is the uh, the the patrols here. So basically, I've got one recorded patrol here, and all I have to do is hit play, and it will start moving and doing the patrol that I should have showed you on that GIF there. So it's just gonna go across, do a nice sweep across here, stop at some of the key points that I had to stop at, and go back to the beginning once it's done there. So we'll let it play through here. And I did see Josh's question about a variable length of time. You can't do a variable length of time on the AutoGuard. It is like a set 15, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. I think it's up to 10 minutes actually. Um, as far as a random movement and stuff like that, I'm not sure about that either. There are like a way to do actually a scheduled one within the actual camera. So you could potentially say at different hours do a different preset if you want to, but I'll have to send you some info on that as well. Yeah, and so that's just going to keep doing that until I kind of override it. You can see once I override it, kind of goes away. And so even if I'm pointing here at the roof in just a couple of seconds, the auto guard is going to go back into function there, and it should snap back to that ramp we just saw in a second or two here. So, and there it goes. So that's kind of the live end of it, portion of this. So we'll go ahead and close this out and get back to the presentation here. So I do want to mention that some of this may seem a little, intimidating. There's a lot of stuff we covered here in a fairly short amount of time, from different new terms maybe to you, new ideas, everything like that. SW is definitely here to help. I want to mention that we can plan out the system with the PTZ in mind. There's times when a PTZ makes a ton of sense, and there's maybe times where it maybe doesn't make the most sense. And we're gonna shoot her straight there and let you know if you think, yeah, the PTZ is going to be your best chance to get these kind of details, or this is going to be a great thing for you to have, or you may go, hey, for the cost of a PTZ, you could get this, and that might be the actual better situation there. So, and then of course, support's going to help you every step of the way, whether you're setting up the presets, the patrols, everything like that. And then I do see one more question, just to hit that before we keep going. Um, Can a patrol be such that a camera patrols from preset to preset but jumps to focus on an intruder? Actually, and that's what we're going to cover here in just a second. So, really good question. So basically, Josh is asking, can the patrol sort of be interrupted to jump to an intruder that's doing on a line cross or intrusion detection? And we actually have a feature that's like that. And I'll cover that in just a second before we get around to, it's our next one here. So really great question though. One of the ones that we get questions about all the time is auto tracking. So this basically is in most of our PTZs where it can see the object and then track it and try to follow it the best it can. This is a good feature for details, sort of like I mentioned with patrols. One of the issues with auto tracking is that sometimes, and as AI gets better and better, I'm sure this is going to get better and better as well. But there's a lot of things to keep in mind with auto tracking that it doesn't. Sometimes when we talk about auto tracking, a lot of times people think about like, well, I have this big parking lot. I'm just going to get this one PTZ that's going to auto track everything, and that's my coverage. And it doesn't often work like that. People who tend to set them up like that are very usually not very satisfied with it, to be honest with you. So you still need to have like a cover scene, a cover camera, like I mentioned with the patrol. So you're covering that parking lot, and then maybe you're using the auto tracking to get better details on the vehicles or the person walking around, so you get a clear look at the face that's maybe not possible with a big wide angle camera on your building, but it's working in tandem to get you the details you need. So definitely want to have a cover camera. One of the ones, and again we'll go over our PTZ specifically here in a little bit, but one of the ones I really like for the auto tracking is one that we call the Watchkeeper Dual Vision. So this has the actual fixed lens built into it, so it sort of solves that issue. In terms of already giving you that cover camera built into it with just one cable. So I really like that for people who are looking into it. And we do have an article on auto tracking that kind of goes into where things maybe aren't where the science fiction maybe shows it sometimes. It's still can auto track, but sometimes it doesn't know, for example, when a car parks, a person's going to get out of that car, and so if the car stops, it goes back to its position and all that. So we'll definitely include that article and maybe the email there, so that way we can get it out there, and you guys can read it if you're more interested. And to Josh's question about, what about having the intruder alert, the line crossing, stuff like that, be able to maybe interrupt that patrol and then go to a certain area. So the answer is there's a way to sort of do that. So one of the coolest features within our system, so this is getting, both our NVRs and the cameras here, is something called Go to Preset. And so what this does is it allows you to set an analytic on a fixed lens camera, or a fixed camera that's kind of looking at a specific area. So for example, a driveway. You may have your parking lot set to where you create a line crossing to set the line crossing to when the line's crossed, the PTZ goes to that area so you can get better details. So that will interrupt that patrol that it's on. It will look at that area, and then it can go back to that auto guard function. So whether that's a patrol or just a preset. And so you can see kind of what that looks like. So basically this is within the actions of drawing the line. I say, hey, when somebody crosses that line, I want you to go down to the van tag preset. And I'll show that with the video since it's definitely a lot easier. Actually jump to that first before I go back to that. So you can see, you guys can't see the line here, unfortunately, but there is a line basically right here. So what we're looking at on the left here is the PTZ, and I'll just actually draw a little line since I've got that ability. Just about right here. And the PTZ is sort of pointing over here. So we're looking at a fixed lens camera here. I'm going to put an F here for that one. And then we're looking at the PTZ over here. I feel like John Madden a little bit right now, but and then I'm going to play it here. So watch this truck here cross that line basically. And you see the PTZ, oops, automatically just jumps over there. And I'm sorry, I meant to pause it, but we'll play that one more time here. So again, it crosses that line, and the PTZ automatically moves to that area based on what we told it to do. So there's a ton of application for this. This is actually what we generally recommend outside of auto tracking, because we can plan it out with a little bit more predictability than maybe with auto tracking. So we know that, I can set specifically, I want to know when vehicles cross this line on this fixed lens camera. So this is a really, really cool feature. Hopefully that makes sense for everybody. So let's put an example there too. So let's just say I have a delivery lane, and I have a fixed lens camera that looks over that, but it's kind of farther away. It doesn't have quite the detail. But I set up a line crossing, like you can see over here what that looks like on the right. And once that line is crossed, again, just like we sort of showed there, the PTZ zooms in, and it gets the ability to see the plate much more clearly. So that gives us a lot of possibilities. Like, there's so many different applications we've done this for. Again, usually parking lots are a great one for it because we can set those line crossings up. But I've had ones where there's some ones that are looking at materials, for example, expensive um, landscaping, like lawnmowers, all that kind of stuff. They set an intrusion detection on that. So if anybody's in there for more than 5 seconds, the PTZ goes over there so they can get details and see what's going on. So there's a lot of application for this, and it's somewhat a little bit difficult to put a bow on it because it is a lot of multifaceted thinking. We got to figure out what's that fixed lens camera looking at, what's the PTZ going to look at, what's going to do after, and stuff like that. And again, that's where that expertise really comes in mind. If we can build this up from the ground up when we're thinking about how do we best secure your facility, this is an amazing feature for it. And I'll just play that one more time as I look at the questions here. Somebody asked, can the PTZ operate on its own without an NVR, just connecting to the network and running it via the app? Actually, yes, you can. We generally recommend the NVR because especially if you have more than one camera, which generally should if you do have a PTZ, it just makes the system a lot easier to manage, and it's a central recording spot. But actually, all of our PTZs do have a micro SD card in that you can record to, and they can independently act on their own if you want to. You can put them into View Station, our mobile app, everything like that, if you just have one for a reason. And then another question is any of these Wi-Fi, which actually we'll cover here in just a second. So that goes into our specific PTZ lineup. And we do have one Wi-Fi PTZ. It is indoor only. So everything else are all wired IP cameras, and they all are PoE based as well. So it's one cable to get to them. Even our biggest one that does 800 feet of infrared and 40x zoom and everything like that is PoE based, which is pretty great. But yeah, we'll breeze through the models here. So the first one we want to talk about, this is our lowest cost PTZ, something we call the Lookout Mini. So this is one of our smaller PTZs. And its main thing is it's a small PTZ, so it's got short range and slower movements. But its main claim to fame is the active deterrence. We've had a webinar on active deterrence as well, if you want to go back and look at that if you're interested in. But this one has that blue and red light. It also has a white light and a speaker. So basically, you can set it to after hours, somebody comes in there, it yells at them, it tells them to get away, turns a white light on them so you can see them in color and everything like that. So it's probably our best active deterrence camera because the speaker is quite loud on it, and it's got that blue and red light and the white light as well. Our newest PTZ is the one we were just actually looking at on the live demo is something called the Bashkin. I think this is a really great one. We just brought it on, and it's our first small dome style PTZ. So it's much smaller than most of our other PTZs, except that mini one there. But it offers a lot more capability. So it's vandal and impact resistant. So this is IK10 rated, gives you a lot of impact resistance in case somebody tries to hit it or something like that. But it's also very flexible when you mount it too. So you can mount it to, the wall like we have over here. We have it for ceilings. You actually can even flush mount it into a ceiling, so it's sort of hidden. So there's a lot of capability in terms of what it can do. And it's also still, as you saw kind of on the demo there, it's actually a medium to long range, quite actually more on the long range side. So you're not really sacrificing, features to get the small size and the attractive look of this camera. So that's why, we think this is going to be one of our most popular PTZs this year. And it's one of our more affordable ones as well. We'll show that in just a second too. And then we go into some of our larger commercial style. Again, not that the Bastion is not the Lookout is not, but these are more of the traditional large big ones. And this is the Lookout. It's got very long range, 60 frames per second, which means that basically movement between things is going to look very, very smooth. It's also got 500 feet of infrared range. And this is actually our fastest PTZ. So, in terms of somebody who's operating the PTZ all the time as like a dedicated part of their job, we generally push people towards this. And then the next one, the Watchkeeper Dual Vision, I mentioned this earlier. We actually have a dual vision and a normal version of this. So the dual vision one's really interesting because it has two cameras built into one. It's got the PTZ on the bottom and then a fixed lens camera here at the top. And so again, when we talk about, I mentioned multiple times throughout this, that having a camera that looks at the wider area is really important for PTZ because PTZ is only as good as what it's looking at that time. So this kind of builds that in there. It only requires one Ethernet cable, so you don't need to run two cables to it or anything like that. So that can save on your labor and installation cost and time. And it's long range. It also has some active deterrence with the flashing white light. With an audio warning, it does have a speaker built into it as well. And again, fast motor, no issues with that whatsoever. And then the last of our major PTZs is something we call the Beacon. This is sort of the crazy long range one. It has not only 40x zoom, so it can see from thousands of feet away, identify somebody, but it also has 820 feet of infrared with 4K resolution. So if you need the ultimate range, we've used these ones in really interesting applications from um, airports looking for any kind of like runway stuff that planes that may be left on the runway and stuff like that. So that's how long range and how good it is in low light situations with that 820 feet of infrared. And here's a chart as well. This is kind of useful for seeing kind of what our lineup looks like and what the difference is between them. So you can kind of see what that looks like. The Garrison is our Wi-Fi one. This is indoor only, but it's very useful for a lot of situations where if you have a strong Wi-Fi connection within your facilities, you can just provide power to it, and then it connects the data through wireless. This has actually been one we've used for some larger kind of inside facilities that they didn't want to run the cable. It wasn't as cost effective. They already had a very good Wi-Fi system built into each of these facilities, so we put these ones in there. It's been a really great success for them. So there's definitely applications for Wi-Fi, and this is definitely one of them there. And since they're way up there in the rafters, they can control it and be able to move things around without having to get a cherry lift and stuff like that, which is another huge aspect of a PTZ. So, but yeah, this is our lineup, and we should probably include this on the email as well, just so people can see that. And to kind of wrap up a little bit here, if you're not sure which PTZ is right for you, if you're not even sure if a PTZ is right for you at all, and sometimes it is and sometimes it's not, again, I'd recommend contacting one of our security experts. There's no obligation. It's a free consultation on the phone, through Zoom. They can look at your floor plans if it's installed. Do a site walk to make sure that yes, this makes sense in this facility, everything like that. But they can kind of build out that plan, that system for you, and make sure it's something that's going to work and it's going to be valuable. We don't want to necessarily push a PTZ for the sake of pushing one. We want to make sure you get the best solution for your security concerns. And with that, I'll jump into any additional questions that we may have. And again, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. And yeah, feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A that you have there on Zoom, or feel free to reach out to us too, whether it's me or the support team or the security expert sales team. They'll be able to help you as well. And while we wait for any questions to come in, I do want to mention our next webinar as well. So we're getting back in the rhythm for 2025 here after the holidays. That's going to be on multi-sensor cameras. These are really, we've got a brand new one coming in that has 4 sensors. We got one that has 2 now. So we also have that Watchkeeper Dual Vision is also a multi-sensor camera. So we're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about them in comparison to fisheyes, kind of where the application is, because these can be really game-changing, whether you have a pre-existing system you're looking to upgrade, or you're doing a net new, because the amount of the amount of cable runs it can save. So really interesting topic, and it's a segment of cameras that's really taken off in the last year. I got one other question. After a line is crossed and that PTZ's reached a preset, where we want to, yeah, that's exactly what you can do. You can set that fixed lens camera, draw that line, have it zoom in wherever you want it to go. So lots of options for that. I'll just go back to that video real quick too and just play that one more time. And again, the line is just above where he's crossing now. And the PTZ knows when that line's crossed to zoom in over there. As far as auto tracking kicking in, not on most of them. I will have to double check that. I think the dual vision can do a little bit more when it comes to that because we can link those two together. So I'll get back with you on that after I do some checking. But for the most part, you sort of want the preset is what we generally recommend just because it's a little bit, again, more predictable. We know exactly where that's going to be. And another question, you have complete systems for residential and home. Absolutely. Like, what we sell is all commercial, grade equipment, 3-year warranty, 5-year warranty options, everything like that. Everything's built for commercial enterprise applications. But we're definitely, people purchase our cameras for their home because they want a higher level of camera than your, consumer grade stuff. So absolutely you can buy it for your home as well as, anything else. Yeah, actually, good point there. So I'm gonna say like if it's on an auto guard where it's just again with auto tracking, if it's just sitting there, it will go into auto tracking mode. But I'm not sure if the go to preset will be able to do it. I'll have to double check that and just verify. But yeah, good question. And another good question is a way to set a priority for auto guard, and not at the moment that I'm aware of. I'll double check that as well. Um, but in terms of what goes ahead of, so like for example, if that go to preset occurs, so this line gets crossed, like we saw here, that's always going to be the priority there. So that's one thing as we're setting this up, we want to make sure that we're not setting it up on 18 different places because then it's going to go, moving around all the time and everything. So we want to do this in a strategic way because this is going to be what it calls. So if it's an auto guard on a patrol or whatever, this is going to take that preset because it's basically the equivalent of me controlling the PTZ, except this, obviously it's a camera telling it to do it. So yeah, in a sense, that's how it is already. So once this line's crossed or it's a intrusion detection or whatever, that's going to be what is set to the priority. And then after that, whatever the time is on that, it's gonna be like 15 seconds. It will look down there and then it'll go back depending on what you set the auto guard to. Yeah, and Josh, that's a great question. So if somebody does jump the fence and you got a line across that fence and you set it to the auto guard for say 30 seconds or something like that, you want to factor that in when you're kind of thinking about that. So maybe you want the auto guard to be more like 60 seconds or something like that. And that's another example where you definitely want to have like because the idea behind this function here is that when we want to get a really good image of that person that is jumping that fence, right? We want to get their face, we want to get any details they're wearing, stuff like that. Um, and so when it zooms in and it gets that face and everything like that, we want that other camera that's looking at the fence to be able to capture the rest of the scene. So if they go off and they do something bad or something like that, that you've got evidence from two different cameras, one that's going to give you a nice clear look at his face, and the other one that's going to capture the scene. So that's kind of what the idea behind those functions are. So that's why it's so important to have that cover camera on the PTZ. And could we increase the priority of auto tracking in terms of like different objects and stuff like that? Not, I don't think you can. You can set auto tracking to be triggered by the line crossing or intrusion detection on the actual PTZ. So if you have it maybe pointed at an area instead of it being like on a patrol, you can set it to only auto track when it does detect like a vehicle or a person. And you can set that line crossing, for example, to only trigger for people or vehicles, not one or the other, or one or the other. You can choose both if you want to too. So that's one way you can kind of get it, but hopefully that answers the question. And if you do have specific ones, or if you already have our equipment as well, feel free to reach out to our support team. They'll kind of be able to go through and kind of look at that and everything, um to see, okay, yeah, what, maybe explain the specific thing you're looking to do with it, and they might be able to say, hey, let's do actually this instead of auto tracking, or maybe let's do that, we can set this up, and then kind of go over it and actually be able to kind of tailor it specifically for you. But gotcha. Yeah, definitely reach out to them. They'll be able to check to see if it's something that is something that's a setting thing, or maybe they'll look at that and see what the best solution for you would be. Yeah, thank you for attending, and yeah, thank you everyone for attending. And again, hopefully we'll see everybody back on our next one, which the end here is going to be on multi-sensor cameras on February 20th. Should be the same time, noon Eastern. And if we don't have any other questions, we'll give it just a minute or two here. If we don't have any other questions, we'll go ahead and we'll end this one for today. And hope everyone has a good rest of the year and a great new year. Yeah, thank you.
That's work, James. It's solid. I think, yeah, I learned a few things. I think that was good.
Yeah,
With
thank
the
you.
auto tracking stuff.
Yeah, it can be fun. It can be, it's not perfect, but it can definitely do the detail
Mm,
that especially as it's gotten smarter over the years. It used to not be something we'd ever really talk about too much, because it used to, when we didn't have the analytics built into the camera to see people and vehicles, it would track a leaf that's moving in the wind too much, and it would be
right,
like, oh man,
right,
it's not something we want to talk about customers with too much, but it's just, but now with people, vehicle detection, that definitely helps. So,
right, right. Very
and
cool.
great question. Can you get a copy of the link of this webinar to see it again? And in the email that you'll get after this, it'll be a recording along with some of the material we talked about during this too. So just keep an eye out for your email. Should be by the end of the day or so, right?
Yeah, for sure. Within should be an hour. Sometimes it takes a little while to process the recording, but yeah,
Yep.
should be about an hour.
All right. Well, not seeing too many other questions coming in, so we'll go ahead. Actually, we did just have one. Are your products tropicalized? And yeah, the answer is every PTZ except one of them is either IP66 or IP67 rated, with pretty high temperature ratings. So they're up to like 140 and everything like that. So I mean, we got these in very humid areas all throughout the country, like very swampy areas in Florida to New Orleans, and everywhere like that, in terms of like high humidity and heat. So shouldn't be a problem whatsoever for any of them, for any of the outdoor rated ones, I should say. Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't imagine should be an issue there either. They should be good to go. As long as it's within that temperature range, which most of them again are like 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So they have quite a big temperature range there. Yeah, anywhere from actually 149 to 158. The only one that's a little on the 122, which is, again, that's the indoor only camera. So, um, but yeah, everything else here has weather protection and uh, high temperature ratings as well, including low temperature ratings too. So for any of our people in really snowy areas, you can see most of them here are rated at negative 40. So it covers really just about everybody, um, for operation and really cold environments as well. So they're rugged for both of them. That's a good question. And all right.
Cool.
Not any other questions? But yeah, anything else you want to add before we jump off?
I think that's it. I was just trying to think of how I'm going to format this table in an email. So I probably I'll probably take a screenshot
I was
of
gonna
this
say probably a
table.
screenshot might be
Yeah,
best.
and then
Yeah.
link to the products for more details. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. And then last question I did just see can the cameras be easily maintained? Yeah, there's not a lot of maintenance you have to do. There's not like you have to go in and do anything with the belts or any motor or anything like that. The main thing is that you do want to keep them relatively clean. Like you don't want to have a bunch of dirt and dust and grime on the cameras because that is going to affect the actual image quality. So, if you get a bunch of dirt and dust on the lens, it's obviously going to look a little bit more dim, especially on the infrared is kind of here in the bottom, so that's what's actually going to light it up at night and everything. So you can think you put more dirt and dust on there, it's just going to be a little less effective. It's not going to give you quite the range it does if it's clean. So that's the big thing. Depending on where you are, if it's a really dusty area, you may want to clean it more frequently. But since they are weatherproof and everything like that, some of our clients just get a hose and rinse it off that way to make sure that all of it's relatively clean there. So all right. Yeah. And if you guys have any other questions as we kind of wrap up here, feel free to reach out to us. You'll see the email, everything like that. Whether you're existing customer that already has our equipment or you're a new customer looking to see if we're the right partner for you, feel free to reach out. We're happy to help answer any questions that you're going to have either about our equipment or your specific security solution that you need to get. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and end this webinar. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you guys and have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.
Thanks, James.